The dizzy spell hit Mira halfway through her shift at the pack clinic, just like it always did around 3 in the afternoon. One moment she was filing patient records, the next the room was spinning and her legs felt like water. She grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself, breathing carefully through her nose until the world stopped tilting. "You okay?" Dr. Calloway looked up from his paperwork, his expression a mix of concern and something else Mira could never quite identify. Impatience, maybe? Or resignation? "That's the 3rd time this week. Maybe you should go home early. Rest. I'm fine. Just stood up too fast." Mira forced a smile, even though her head was pounding and her vision was still spotty around the edges. "I'll drink some water. Take a break. You always say that?" Dr. Calloway's voice had an edge to it now. "And then you push through until you collapse. Mira, you need to take your health seriously. The chronic fatigue, the dizzy spells, the weaknesses aren't normal for a 26-year-old wolf." Mira knew, she knew better than anyone that she wasn't normal. She'd been sick her entire life, or at least for as long as she could remember. Weak constitution, the pack healer had said when she was 7 and couldn't keep up with the other pups during training. Genetic disorder? They'd decided when she was 12 and started having episodes where her wolf simply wouldn't shift. Chronic illness requiring lifelong management. They'd concluded when she was 18 and still struggling with basic physical tasks that came naturally to every other wolf. She was 26 now, and nothing had changed. If anything, things had gotten worse. The dizzy spells were daily. The fatigue was constant. Her wolf was so weak she could barely shift without collapsing afterward. And the clumsiness god, the clumsiness. She couldn't go a day without dropping something, tripping over nothing, or accidentally breaking whatever she touched because her hands wouldn't cooperate. The pack was patient with her. Mostly. They'd made accommodations, given her desk jobs instead of patrol work, let her skip physical training, didn't expect her to participate in pack runs or hunts. She was the fragile one, the sickly wolf who'd never quite developed properly. People spoke quietly around her like she might break, asked how she was feeling in that particular tone reserved for invalids, and generally treated her like a piece of delicate glass that needed constant protection. Mira hated it. Hated being weak. Hated being pitied. Hated the way people looked at her with sympathy mixed with slight inconvenience. But what could she do? She'd been to every healer in 5 territories. Had undergone more tests than she could count. Tried every treatment, every supplement, every magical remedy anyone suggested. Nothing helped. She was just defective. Broken in some fundamental way that couldn't be fixed. "I made you another batch of the supplement tonic," Dr. Calloway said, pulling out a small dark bottle from his desk drawer. "This one has added iron and some herbs," the healer recommended. "Should help with the fatigue. Take it twice, daily, once in the morning, once at night. Don't skip doses." Mira took the bottle. It looked the same as all the other bottles she'd been given over the years. Dark glass. Handwritten label, liquid inside that tasted like medicine and earth. She'd been taking these tonics since she was 10, 16 years of supplements that never seemed to actually supplement anything. "Thank you," she said, because what else could she say? Dr. Calloway was trying to help. Everyone was trying to help. It wasn't their fault. She was fundamentally broken. She took the first dose right there, measuring out the correct amount and swallowing it down. It tasted worse than usual, bitter with an underlying metallic taste that made her want to gag. But she'd learned to ignore taste. Had learned to accept that medicine was never pleasant but allegedly necessary. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of paperwork and carefully managed tasks. By the time she got home to her small apartment in the pack housing complex, she was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that made even the act of changing into pajamas feel like climbing a mountain. She collapsed into bed without bothering to eat dinner. Food made her nauseous lately anyway. Another symptom on the long list of things wrong with her body. Another problem without a solution. Sleep came quickly, but it wasn't restful. It never was. Mira's dreams were always strange, fragmented memories that didn't quite make sense. Running through forests faster than should be possible, feeling strong and powerful and whole, fighting opponents with skills she'd never possessed while awake. In her dreams, she was everything she couldn't be in reality. Healthy, strong, capable. She woke before dawn, feeling worse than when she'd gone to bed. Her head throbbed, her joints ached. Her wolf was so distant she could barely feel the connection. Another day of being broken. Another day of pretending everything was manageable when it wasn't. Mira dragged herself to the bathroom and started her morning routine. The supplement tonic was on the counter where she'd left it last night. She measured out the dose, hesitated with the spoon halfway to her mouth. For years she'd been taking these supplements. For years she'd been told they were helping manage her condition. But she didn't feel helped. If anything, she felt progressively worse as time went on. The dizzy spells were more frequent now than they'd been 5 years ago. The weakness was more pronounced. The clumsiness was getting dangerous. She'd burned herself twice last week alone because her hands wouldn't grip things properly. What if the supplements weren't helping? What if they were? No. That was paranoid thinking. Dr. Calloway was the packed physician. He'd been taking care of her since childhood. Why would he give her something that made her worse? Mira swallowed the supplement and tried to ignore the way it made her stomach turn. Tried to ignore the little voice in the back of her mind that whispered questions she didn't want to examine too closely. Work was difficult. Everything was difficult lately. Simple tasks like organizing files or answering phones felt monumentally exhausting. By lunch, Mira had already had 2 dizzy spells and dropped 3 different objects because her hands were shaking. "You really should go home," Dr. Calloway said again, appearing in the doorway of the filing room where Mira was trying to reorganize patient records. "You look terrible." "No offense. None taken." "I feel terrible." Mira set down the file she'd been holding before she could drop it. "But I'm fine." "Jasnita?" The world tilted violently. Not the usual gentle spinning, but a sudden, complete loss of equilibrium that sent Mira crashing to the floor. Her head cracked against the metal filing cabinet on the way down. Pain exploded behind her eyes. She heard Dr. Calloway curse, heard his footsteps rushing over, felt his hands checking her pulse, examining the rapidly forming bump on her head. "That's it. You're going to the hospital. This is beyond what I can treat here." His voice was firm, but there was something underneath it. Something that made Mira's foggy brain try to focus despite the pain. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No, please, I just need to rest." Mira tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The room spun worse than before. Her stomach heaved. "I can't afford the pack. We'll cover it." "Mira, you just had a seizure?" Your eyes rolled back. "You were convulsing." Dr. Calloway was already pulling out his phone. "This isn't a dizzy spell. This is serious." Seizure? Mira didn't remember having a seizure. She remembered feeling dizzy, remembered falling, remembered pain. But convulsing? That didn't sound right. That sounded like her thoughts were too scattered to complete. Everything hurt. And Dr. Calloway was already on the phone with emergency services. His voice urgent and professional as he described her condition. The ambulance came. Paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher. Dr. Calloway insisted on coming along, sitting beside her in the back of the vehicle, holding her hand in a way that should have been comforting but somehow wasn't. "It's going to be okay," he said. "We'll figure out what's wrong. Get you proper treatment. This has gone on long enough." Mira wanted to ask what he meant by that. Wanted to ask why he suddenly seemed so concerned when he'd been treating her for years without much progress. Wanted to ask a lot of things. But consciousness was slipping away, pulled under by pain and exhaustion and something else. Something that felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Dr. Calloway's voice, quiet and tinged with what might have been guilt. "I'm sorry, but it's for the best. You'll understand eventually." Mira woke in a hospital room that was too bright and too cold. Her head still throbbed, but the pain had diminished to a manageable level. She could hear the steady beep of monitors, smell antiseptic and something medicinal, feel the scratch of hospital sheets against her skin. She tried to sit up and found she couldn't. Not because she was physically restrained, but because her body simply wouldn't cooperate. Her limbs felt heavy, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. "Easy. Don't try to move yet." A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Mira turned her head slowly, carefully, and saw a doctor she didn't recognize standing beside her bed. Young, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and an expression that was more calculating than compassionate. "You've had a significant neurological event. We need to run some tests. Where's Dr. Calloway?" Mira's voice came out raspy, her throat dry. "He's speaking with the department head. Providing your medical history." The woman, Dr. Zhang, according to her name tag, pulled out a pen. "Look at me. I need to check your pupil response." Mira followed instructions, letting the doctor shine light in her eyes. Check her reflexes, ask standard neurological questions. Through it all, something felt off. The way Dr. Zhang moved. The way she kept glancing at the door like she was waiting for something. The way her hands were just slightly unsteady when she made notes on her tablet. "Your blood work came back interesting," Dr. Zhang said finally. "There are some anomalies we need to discuss. Specifically," she stopped as the door opened. Dr. Calloway entered, followed by another man Mira didn't recognize. This one was older, probably in his 50s, with silver hair and an air of authority that marked him as someone important. He looked at Mira with an expression she couldn't read: surprise, mixed with concern, mixed with something that might have been fear. "Mira." Dr. Calloway's voice was carefully neutral. "This is Dr. Marcus Chun. He's the head of supernatural medicine here. We've been consulting on your case." "My case," Mira's fuzzy brain struggled to process. "I fell and hit my head." "Why does the head of supernatural medicine need to consult?" "Because your blood work revealed something unexpected." Dr. Chun moved closer to her bed, his movements deliberate. "Tell me, Mira, how long have you been taking supplements from Dr. Calloway?" "Since I was 10. "Why? And have you ever had your blood tested by anyone other than Dr. Calloway's clinic?" Mira thought about it. "No. He's been my primary physician my whole life." "Why are you asking these questions?" Dr. Chun and Dr. Zhang exchanged a look. Dr. Calloway's expression was carefully blank, but Mira saw his jaw tighten, saw his hands clench at his sides. "Your blood work shows traces of Wolfsbane poisoning," Dr. Chun said bluntly. "Specifically, a rare variant that's been refined to suppress supernatural abilities without causing obvious symptoms. It's administered in small doses over long periods of time. The cumulative effect is what you've been experiencing: weakness, dizziness, inability to shift properly, chronic fatigue." The words didn't make sense. Mira stared at him, waiting for the part where this turned into a mistake or a misunderstanding. "That's impossible. I haven't been poisoned. I've been sick. I have a genetic disorder. You don't have a genetic disorder. You have systematic poisoning." Dr. Zhang pulled up something on her tablet and turned it toward Mira. "See these markers? This is your blood panel from today. And this," she swiped to another image, "is what your blood should look like based on your genetic profile. The difference is striking." Mira looked at the images but couldn't process what they were showing her. Her brain felt sluggish, refusing to accept what they were implying. "You're saying someone's been poisoning me? For 16 years? That's insane. Why would anyone?" She stopped, looked at Dr. Calloway, who wouldn't meet her eyes. "You." The realization hit like physical blow. "You've been giving me the poison? In the supplements?" "You've been," her voice rose. You've been making me sick on purpose. I can explain, Dr. Calloway started. Explain? Mira tried to sit up, managed it this time despite her body's protests. You've been poisoning me since I was 10 years old, making me think I was broken, making me believe I was defective and weak. What possible explanation could justify that? Because you're not supposed to exist. The words came out flat, matter of fact. Dr. Calloway finally met her eyes, and Mira saw something in them that made her blood run cold. Not guilt. Not remorse. Certainty. You're an immortal bloodline, Mira. The last of your kind. And immortals are dangerous. With the pack elders, we decided it was safer to suppress your abilities than to let you discover what you are. The room went silent. Mira heard her own breathing, loud in her ears. Heard the steady beep of the heart monitor that was starting to speed up as her pulse raced. I'm what? The words barely made it past her lips. Immortal bloodline. It's a genetic mutation that occurs in approximately 1 in 10 million wolves. Those who have it don't age past their prime, can heal from almost any injury, possess strength and speed far beyond normal wolves, and are functionally unkillable through conventional means. Dr. Chun's voice was clinical, educational. There haven't been any documented immortals in nearly a century. Most were eliminated during the Great Purge 200 years ago. The packs feared them, saw them as threats to the natural order. But I'm not strong. I'm not fast. I can barely shift without collapsing. Mira's voice was rising toward hysterical. How can I be immortal when I'm the weakest wolf in the pack? Because you've been poisoned since before your abilities could fully manifest, Dr. Zhang explained. Immortal bloodlines typically show first signs around age 8 to 10. The enhanced healing, the unusual strength, the fact that injuries that should be serious barely affect them. Someone would have noticed. So they started the suppression before you could develop. Kept you weak and sick so you'd never discover what you really are. The pack elders knew. Dr. Calloway's voice was quiet now, resigned. Your parents knew what you were when you were born. They tried to hide it, tried to protect you. But word got out. The elders decided it was too dangerous to let you grow into your power, too much of a threat. So we implemented a long-term suppression protocol. My parents, Mira's voice broke. Where are my parents? The silence that followed was answer enough. They objected to the protocol, Dr. Calloway said finally. Tried to take you and run. They were dealt with, made to look like a rogue attack. You were 6 years old, too young to remember them clearly. We told you they died protecting the pack. That you were lucky to survive. Mira felt something inside her crack. Not crack, like ice developing fissures before it shattered completely. You killed my parents, and then you spent 20 years poisoning me, making me believe I was defective, making me hate my own body for failing me when all along her voice was shaking now. All along I was fine. I was more than fine. I was dangerous. Dr. Calloway's voice was firm. Immortals are dangerous, Mira. History proves it. They become tyrants, dictators. They live for centuries and accumulate power. And eventually they always cause devastation. The pack elders made a hard choice, but the right one. They kept you alive but controlled. Safe but contained. Safe. Mira's laugh came out strangled. You think making me sick for 20 years kept me safe? You think murdering my parents was keeping me safe? It kept the pack safe. It kept you from becoming a monster. Dr. Calloway moved toward her bed. Mira, you need to understand. Don't. Mira held up a hand and was surprised when he actually stopped. Surprised at the authority in her own voice. Don't come near me. Don't touch me. Don't. The heart monitor started shrieking. Mira's vision went white at the edges. She felt something inside her, something that had been compressed and suppressed and locked away for 20 years, suddenly surged toward the surface. power. Real power. Not the pathetic, weak wolf she'd thought she had, but something vast and ancient and absolutely furious. Sedate her. Dr. Calloway's voice was panicked. She's manifesting. We need to know. Dr. Chun's voice cut across him, sharp with command. Let it happen. She needs to purge the poison from her system. Forcing more suppressants now could kill her. Mira barely heard them. She was too focused on the sensation of her body changing. Not shifting into wolf form, that was too simple, too small for what was happening. This was transformation on a cellular level. Every fiber of her being rewriting itself, poison being burned away by power that had been waiting decades to be free. It hurt. God, it hurt. Like being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously. Like dying and being reborn in the same moment. Mira screamed, the sound raw and primal and nothing like her usual weak, uncertain voice. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Mira collapsed back on the hospital bed, gasping. Her body felt different, wrong and right at the same time. She held up her hands that had been clumsy and shaky for as long as she remembered. Dawn watched them stay perfectly steady. She sat up. No dizziness. No weakness. No exhaustion. She felt strong. How do you feel? Dr. Zhang's voice was cautious, like approaching a wild animal. Different. Mira's voice came out clear and steady. She looked at Dr. Calloway, who was backing toward the door. You poisoned me for 20 years. Made me weak. Made me believe I was broken. And now she stood. Was vaguely surprised when her legs held her weight easily. Now I'm exactly what you feared I'd become. Mira, please. Dr. Calloway's face was pale. You have to understand. We were just following orders. Orders to murder my parents. Orders to poison a child. Orders to suppress someone's entire existence because you were afraid. Mira took a step forward and watched Dr. Calloway flinch back. Good. Let him be afraid. Who gave those orders? Who decided my life was worth less than Pack's peace of mind? The Pack elders. Alpha Garrett, specifically. But Mira, you can't what? Seek justice? Demand answers? Hold people accountable for 20 years of abuse. Mira's voice was rising again, but now it wasn't from weakness or hysteria. It was from power. From righteous fury that had nowhere to go but out. Watch me. She walked past Dr. Calloway. He pressed himself against the wall to avoid touching her and out of the hospital room. The hallway was bright and sterile and full of people who stopped and stared as she passed. She could see herself reflected in the glass of the nurse's station. She looked different, stood different. Her eyes were glowing with light she'd never seen before. Miss, you need to stay in your room, a nurse tried to stop her. Mira looked at her and the woman froze mid-sentence, going pale. I'm leaving. Mira's voice carried command she'd never possessed before. Don't try to stop me. No one did. Everyone got out of her way as she walked through the hospital and out into the parking lot. Into sunlight that felt brighter than it should, air that smelled sharper, sounds that were clearer. Everything was more vivid, more real, more right. This was what she should have felt like her entire life. This was what had been stolen from her. Mira started walking. She had no destination in mind, just knew she needed to move, needed to process, needed to figure out what to do with this information that had shattered her entire reality. She'd made it maybe 3 blocks when a vehicle pulled up beside her. Expensive car, tinted windows, engine so quiet she barely heard it. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a woman in the driver's seat, 40s, elegant, with eyes that assessed Mira with interest rather than fear. You must be Mira. The woman's voice was cultured, calm. I'm Helena Domir. I've been looking for you for a very long time. Mira stopped walking. I don't know you. No. But I knew your parents. I was there the night they died, trying to protect you from the pack elders. Helena's expression was sympathetic. And I've been monitoring your situation for years, waiting for the day you'd finally break free of the suppression. Waiting for the day I could help you. Help me. How? By teaching you what you are, what you can do, how to survive in a world that fears immortals. Helena gestured to the passenger seat. Get in. We have a lot to discuss. And not much time before Alpha Garrett realizes you've manifested and sends wolves to recapture you. Mira looked at this stranger, offering help. Looked back at the hospital, where Dr. Calloway was probably already calling the pack elders. Looked at her own hands, still steady and strong, and so different from how they'd been just hours ago. She got in the car. Helena drove in silence for several minutes, navigating through city streets with practiced ease. Finally, when they were clear of the pack's territory, she spoke. Your parents were friends of mine. Good people. They discovered what you were when you were 3 years old. You healed from a broken arm in hours instead of weeks. They knew what that meant. Knew the danger. Helena's voice was matter-of-fact. They tried to run. Made it 3 years before the pack caught up with them. I tried to help. Tried to get you all to safety. Failed. You were there when they died. Yes. And I've carried that guilt for 20 years. Should have done more. Should have fought harder. Should have... She stopped. But I didn't. And you paid the price. So now I'm trying to make it right. By what? Teaching me to be the monster they always feared. By teaching you to be what you actually are. An immortal isn't automatically a monster, Mira. Any more than any wolf is automatically good or evil. You have power. What you do with it, that's your choice. Helena glanced at her. But you deserve to make that choice with full knowledge. Not with 20 years of lies and poison clouding your judgment. They drove for another hour, leaving the city entirely. Helena took them to a property in the mountains, isolated, beautiful, with a house that looked like it had been there for generations. She led Mira inside and gestured to a comfortable sitting room. This is a safe house. One of many I maintain for supernatural refugees. You can stay here as long as you need. No one will find you. Mira sat, suddenly exhausted despite her body's newfound strength. Tell me everything. I want to know what I am. What I can do. What was taken from me. Helena settled across from her. Immortal bloodlines are rare, but not unheard of historically. You'll heal from virtually any injury given enough time. You could recover from a severed limb. You don't age past your physical prime, which for most immortals is mid to late 20s. You're stronger and faster than normal wolves. Your senses are sharper. And she paused. You're functionally unkillable through conventional means. Functionally? There are ways to kill an immortal. Prolonged deprivation of all food and water. Certain magical means. Being reduced to ash, with no body left to regenerate from. But those require deliberate, sustained effort. Regular violence won't do it. Helena's expression was serious. That's why packs fear you. Because you can't be controlled through normal dominant structures. Can't be killed if you become a threat. You're outside the usual power dynamics. So they poison me instead. It's happened before. Throughout history, whenever an immortal is discovered young, packs have 3 choices. Accept them, drive them out, or suppress them. Your pack chose suppression. Helena pulled out a file from somewhere and placed it on the table between them. This is everything I've been able to gather about your bloodline, your parents' research, information about other immortals throughout history. What happened to them? How they survived or didn't. Mira opened the file with hands that still felt strange in their steadiness. Inside were documents, photographs, DNA records. Her parents' faces stared up at her from pictures she'd never seen. They looked happy, looked loving, looked like they'd do anything to protect their daughter. They had done anything, and it hadn't been enough. What happened to the other immortals? Mira asked quietly. The ones in history? Did they become monsters? Some did. Lived too long, saw too much, lost their empathy, and became tyrants. But others, Helena tapped one particular document. Others lived quiet lives, used their power to protect rather than dominate, became healers, guardians, teachers, lived for centuries and made the world better rather than worse. So it's not inevitable. The corruption, nothing is inevitable. Power corrupts only if you let it. Fear corrupts more reliably than power ever could. Helena's voice was firm. You're angry right now. You have every right to be. 20 years of abuse, your parents murdered, your entire life a lie. But Mira, how you respond to that anger will define what kind of immortal you become. Mira thought about Dr. Calloway, about Alpha Garrett and the pack elders who'd decided her life was acceptable collateral damage. About 20 years of dizzy spells and weakness and believing she was fundamentally broken. She thought about revenge. About using her newfound power to make them suffer the way they'd made her suffer. About burning it all down and walking away from the ashes. And then she thought about her parents. About them trying to protect her. About them dying for her. About whether they'd want her to become the monster the pack had always feared. I don't want revenge, she said finally. I want justice. I want them held accountable. I want other wolves to know what they did so no one else suffers like I did. She looked at Helena. Can you help me do that? Yes, but it won't be easy. The pack will fight back. Alpha Garrett won't give up power without resistance. And Mira, Helena's expression was serious. Once you do this, once you expose them, there's no going back to your old life. You'll be making yourself a target. Immortals who reveal themselves publicly don't usually live peaceful lives. My old life was a lie anyway. I'd rather be a target with the truth than comfortable with poisoned safety. Mira stood, was pleased when her legs were still steady. How do we start? Over the next 3 weeks, Helena taught Mira everything. How to access her full strength without accidentally breaking things. How to move with the speed she was capable of. How to truly fight now that her body could actually follow through on instinct. How to sense other wolves' intentions, a skill immortals developed as survival mechanism. And every day, Mira grew stronger. Not just physically, but mentally. The fog that had clouded her thoughts for 20 years lifted completely. She could think clearly, could remember things she'd forgotten, could process complex information without the exhaustion that used to overwhelm her. She was also remembering her parents. Not clearly, she'd been too young and the poison had suppressed too much, but fragments. Her mother's laugh. Her father teaching her to shift. Both of them looking at her with love and pride and determination to keep her safe. They'd failed, but they'd tried. That mattered. I want to go back, Mira said one evening. To the pack. I want to confront Alpha Garrett. I want him to answer for what he did. Are you sure? Helena's voice was cautious. Once you do this, you're declaring yourself. Every pack in 5 territories will know there's an immortal who survived suppression. You'll be both famous and hunted. I'm sure. He killed my parents. He poisoned me for 20 years. He needs to face consequences. Mira met Helena's eyes. And I need to face him without fear for the first time in my life. They made a plan. Careful, strategic, designed to maximize safety while achieving justice. Helena had contact SWOs who'd also been hurt by corrupt pack leadership, who'd help expose Alpha Garrett's crimes. They'd coordinate, make sure Mira wasn't walking into an ambush. 2 days later, Mira walked back into pack territory for the first time since manifesting. She'd changed in the weeks away, not just in power, but in presence. She moved differently, stood differently. Her eyes held certainty that had never been there before. Pack members stared as she walked through the compound toward the pack house. Word spread quickly. The sick girl was back. But she didn't look sick anymore. She looked dangerous. Alpha Garrett met her at the pack house entrance, flanked by guards. He was older than Mira remembered, or maybe she'd just never really seen him before. Late 50s, graying at the temples, with eyes that assessed her with calculation rather than concern. Mira, we've been looking for you. You left the hospital against medical advice. You mean I left before you could pump me full of more poison to resuppress my immortal bloodline? Mira's voice carried across the courtyard. Pack members were gathering now, drawn by the confrontation. Good. Let them hear this. Tell them, Alpha Garrett. Tell them what you've been doing to me since I was 6 years old. I don't know what you're talking about. You've been ill. We've been treating you've been poisoning me. Mira pulled out documents Helena had helped her obtain. Medical records. Financial transactions. Dr. Calloway's confession, recorded when he'd broken down under guilt. You discovered I was immortal bloodline when I was 3. You had my parents killed when they tried to protect me. And then you spent 20 years systematically poisoning me to suppress my abilities because you were afraid of what I might become. Silence. Heavy, damning silence. Pack members were looking at each other. At Alpha Garrett, at Mira, standing strong and steady and absolutely certain. Even if that were true, which it isn't, it would have been for the good of the pack. Immortals are dangerous, Garrett started. I was 6 years old. I was a child. And you had my parents murdered and made me believe I was defective for 2 decades. Mira's voice was rising, but she didn't care. Let them hear her rage. Let them understand what had been done. You don't get to justify that. You don't get to claim fear as an excuse for murder and systematic abuse. The pack elders agreed. Then the pack elders are guilty too. Every wolf who knew and said nothing. Every wolf who participated. Every wolf who watched a child be poisoned and did nothing to stop it. Mira looked around at the assembled pack. Some of you knew. Some of you suspected. And you all stayed silent. Well, I'm not silent anymore. And I'm not weak anymore. And I'm not going to let this stand. What exactly do you think you're going to do? Garrett's voice turned cold. Challenge me. You're one wolf against an entire pack. Immortal or not, those are bad odds. She's not alone. Helena stepped out from the crowd, followed by a dozen other wolves. Witnesses, allies, wolves Helena had been gathering who were tired of corrupt pack leadership. The Council of 5 Territories has been informed of your crimes. They're sending investigators. You're going to face trial, Garrett. For murder. For conspiracy. For systematic abuse of a minor. And all of your pack elders who knew they're going down with you. Garrett's face went through several expressions. Shock, fear, calculation. You can't prove anything. It's her word against mine. Actually, we can prove everything. Helena held up a recording device. Dr. Calloway gave a full confession. Detailed everything. Every dose of poison. Every lie. Every time he watched you suffer, Mira, and did nothing. It's all documented. All recorded. All admissible as evidence. The pack was murmuring now. Some looked shocked. Some looked guilty. Some looked angry at Garrett, at the elders, at the entire situation. The power structure that had seemed so solid was cracking. I'm not asking for revenge, Mira said into the noise. I'm asking for justice. For my parents who died protecting me. For the 20 years I lost to poison and lies. For every other wolf who might be suffering because pack leadership decided fear was more important than ethics. She looked at Garrett directly. You're going to answer for what you did. All of you are. And every pack in 5 territories will know what happens when you abuse power and call it protection. The council investigators arrived 2 days later. The trial took 3 months. Testimonies from Dr. Calloway pack members who'd known and stayed silent, medical experts who confirmed the systematic poisoning, evidence that was overwhelming and undeniable. Alpha Garrett was found guilty. So were 4 of the 5 pack elders. The 5th had died years ago, escaping justice. Sentences ranged from exile to execution, depending on level of involvement. Dr. Calloway got life imprisonment for murder and conspiracy. And through it all, Mira testified. Stood in front of 5 territorial alphas and hundreds of witnesses and told her story? Every detail, every year of suffering, every lie she'd been fed, every moment she'd believed she was broken when she'd actually been deliberately destroyed. The verdict sent shockwaves through all 5 territories. Pack leadership scrambled to review their own histories, to make sure there were no other suppressed immortals hiding in plain sight, to prove they weren't like Garrett and his elders. Mira became famous, infamous, the immortal who'd survived suppression, the wolf who'd exposed corrupt leadership, the symbol of what happened when packs chose fear over ethics. 6 months after the trial, Mira stood in her new apartment in neutral territory, not pack lands, but a city where supernatural and human coexisted. Helena had helped her get established, helped her start a life that was hers, not defined by pack politics or past trauma. "How are you adjusting?" Helena asked during one of her regular visits. "Better. Some days are hard. I still have nightmares about being weak, about dropping things, about everyone looking at me with pity." Mira gestured around her apartment, modest but comfortable, filled with things she'd chosen for herself. "But most days, I just feel free, like I finally get to exist without apologizing for taking up space." "What are you going to do? Long term? You have centuries ahead of you." "That's a lot of time to fill." Mira had been thinking about that. "I want to help other wolves who've been suppressed or abused by pack structures. Create resources for them. Use my voice to expose other corrupt leaders. Maybe," she stopped, the idea still forming, "maybe prevent what happened to me from happening to anyone else." "That's a good purpose. A worthy one." Helena smiled. "Your parents would be proud." "I think so too. I hope so." Mira looked at her hands, steady and strong, and finally hers. "They died trying to protect me. The least I can do is use what they gave, mirror what was stolen from me to protect others." Years passed. 5, then 10, then 20. Mira didn't age past 28. Watched the world change around her while she stayed constant. Built the advocacy organization she'd dreamed of. Helped dozens of wolves escape abusive pack structures. Exposed 3 more corrupt alpha leaderships. Became someone young wolves looked up to, proof that surviving trauma didn't mean letting it define you. She was careful. Never stayed in one place too long. Never let anyone get close enough to use as leverage. Immortality meant living with constant awareness that she'd outlive everyone she cared about. That she was fundamentally different in ways that mattered. But she was also free. Free to be strong. Free to be capable. Free to be everything she'd been denied for 20 years. And that freedom was worth the isolation. 50 years after her manifestation, Mira stood in the same mountains where Helena had taken her to that safe house. Helena was gone, no old age, peaceful death, surrounded by friends. Mira had been there at the end, holding her mentor's hand, grateful for the woman who'd given her the tools to survive immortality. Other friends had come and gone, other allies, other wolves Mira had loved and lost to time. The cost of living forever was saying goodbye over and over while you remained unchanged. But Mira wasn't unchanged. Not really. She'd grown, evolved, become something her 6-year-old self could never have imagined. Strong and wise and powerful and kind, using centuries of experience to help others, to make the world incrementally better. She'd been clumsy and sick for 20 years, poised to keep her from discovering she was immortal. And when the truth finally emerged, when the poison finally burned away, she'd become exactly what they'd feared she'd be. Not a monster, but someone who couldn't be controlled. Someone who refused to let abuse be justified. Someone who used power to protect rather than dominate. She was immortal, and she was everything they'd tried to suppress. And she was finally, completely, perfectly free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.